What's up guys, Crazy here, back into Borderlands, and of course this game has no shortage of grenade mods. There's at least a few dozen of these in the game, many of them are very powerful, while others are very fun to play around with. So what I did is I tested most, if not all of the legendary grenade mods that I had, and I made a top 5 list of the ones that I found to be the best, or at the very least the most suited for my current playstyle. But if there's any one of them that you think should be included on today's list, then go ahead and let me know down below. And towards the end of this video, I'm also going to showcase a few honorable mentions. Now, in no particular order, I'm going to start things off with the fifth one, and that is of course the Widowmaker. And I started with this because I found it to be very interesting, it's very cool, and the one that I got is a Nerf variant that comes with radiation damage and also spawns 3 Nerf grenades. So this is a wall drop, I don't think there's a dedicated spot to get it, but the way mine works is pretty damn cool. You throw it on the ground, it bounces and it spawns these landmines. All of these Widowmakers will spawn these landmines, except mine can spawn 3 at the same time. So when an enemy comes inside these red circles or when it expires, these landmines will shoot up in the air, it will cause these grenades to explode into homing rockets and they will start chasing the nearest enemies, or if there's no enemies, they will just randomly shoot themselves into walls or buildings or whatever. But the way it works is actually very good against groups of enemies that tend to stay together, or if you're putting it in very tight spots, because it pretty much forces your enemies to walk in these landmines, and these will cause all of these explosions and homing rockets to go up against the enemies. But it can work in the open world as well, it's not really a downside to that, though I did found certain scenarios when enemies would be very close into the circle or even right next to the grenade and it wouldn't explode because of a small obstacle or bump in the terrain. So that is like a downside of it that kinda sounds like a bug. But otherwise, when it does work, it's actually very powerful, and since there's also some splash damage on this, it's definitely going to wreck them. Moving on to the next one, we have Moxie's Bouncing Bear, and unfortunately this also doesn't have a dedicated drop, it's a wall drop. You can get this from Tyrene, Troy, and even from loot chests. First of all, it comes with a really high damage of 3400, its radius is pretty small, but it also comes with its unique functionality, as in when you throw it, you actually throw 2 grenades at the same time. One of them is always going to be incendiary, while the other one is going to be electric. And as you can see, this can bounce quite a lot of times before they actually run out, and they are extremely suited against almost all enemy types in the game. Let's say for example you're fighting against an enemy that has huge shields as well as a huge HP pool. Well, because you deal both incendiary and electric damage, you can quickly take off its shield and then let the incendiary part take care of its health. So this combo over here I found to be extremely powerful, especially against champions, especially against enemies that tend to have large HP pools or just large shields. Maybe the only downside to it is the fact that since it bounces so much, it can bounce back into you and it can deal damage. But for example, if you're using something like the transformer, the electricity part of it can even heal you because of the way it works. But otherwise, it's very powerful and you can even throw it against a group of enemies and all of those bounces will affect most, if not all of them. Moving on to the 5th spot, we have something that I found to be quite unique, and this is the Negara. This is another grenade mod in the Hyperion category, and I didn't get mine with any particularly special modifiers over here. It's not anointed or anything. Now the way this works is pretty damn cool. You throw it in, it spawns this circle of 6 grenades that all get launched into the target or whatever is in front of them. So this is a really cool functionality, because what this means is that if you're aiming this at a weak spot, let's say against the Graveyard, this can definitely deal a lot of critical damage, and it can potentially even bring you back grenades if you're playing with something like Moses grenade build. But otherwise, it can also just deal straight up very good damage against almost any enemy type. The only couple of downsides that I can think about are the fact that I don't think this one comes with any elemental damage, and the second one, its range can be limited if you're throwing it from too far away, even though the longbow effect might say otherwise. But yeah, its range can be limited, which is why you might want to be careful with this one. But when it works, its huge concentration of fast explosions can definitely overwhelm them, and you can pretty much melt almost anything as long as they don't have resistances to your current damage. So if your modifiers for Mayhem 3 are not in your way, you are going to shred through almost anything. Now moving on to the next one, we are starting to move on into the powerful, maybe even overpowered territory, even though I kinda don't want to say this because whatever grenades we have left right now are in a pretty good spot and I don't think they should get nerfed anymore. But in this case, I'm going to go over the Stormfront grenade because this is a very interesting one. This has been powerful almost since day one. I don't think this was ever weak. This pretty much spawns only with the electrical elemental, and this can drop from Captain Trount. If you want to get this, you can get it from him. It has an increased chance to drop from Captain Trount on Athena's. But this works really nicely. It will spawn several grenades, about 6 or 7 of them, and all of them will cause chain lightning. And because you can shoot so many of these at the same time, you can continuously cause chain lightning to the enemy and have all of these grenades spawn all over the place. And the results are at the very least fun to look at, if not downright powerful, because you can both deal a lot of damage and the way it does it looks very impressive. Maybe the only downside over here is the fact that these are not homing, so if you throw them on the ground, on impact they will explode and they won't chase the enemy. But honestly, you don't even care about that because the area of effect is so big, the chain lightning effect can strike the enemies from so far away that you won't even care about that. You can pretty much cover the entire battlefield with a couple of these, and these will further split into smaller grenades that further use chain lightning on the enemy, so the results are again very good, especially against enemy shields. Anyway, on the number 1 spot and for the build that I'm using is the Quasar. In this case, for the most build, this is probably going to be the replacement for the former Hex grenades that have been pretty much nerfed into the ground, and this works very similar to that, even better as a matter of fact because of the fact that it kind of pulls enemies in. So the damage on this thing is pretty damn high, almost 30,000. Its radius is also pretty big. It comes exclusively with electrical damage, and it also comes with that nice little bonus over there, 25% damage to stuck targets, and you are definitely going to stuck a lot of targets. In this case, my variant is a sticky one with a longbow effect, and I believe that this is like one of the best variants you can get in the game. It's also a Hyperion, and I believe that if you get it as an Atlas, for example, it will spawn as a homing, and there's another one that can spawn for a different manufacturer, but yeah, this is the one that I got, and it's pretty damn sweet. You throw it in the enemy's face, it still causes these landmines to appear, but since they immediately explode on impact onto the enemy, and because of the longbow effect, it immediately causes them to explode, cause those chain lightning, and also pull all of the enemies in. It prevents them from ever shooting, which means that you can mitigate even more damage by simply using one such grenade. Now, I was talking about honorable mentions, and I want to talk about one that was very recently nerfed. In one of the previous patches we talked about this, and that is of course the Hex grenade. In this case, I had a Merv-tacular Hex that spawned 6 Merv grenades. It came with cryo damage and it also homed in on the closest target. So this was the core, or well, the essence of my previous build. As you can see, it spawned a ton of these grenades. It pretty much freezed anything, and I could clear the slaughter arena or anything in the game with so much ease without ever even dropping 1 bar of my HP. It was just amazing. I admit it was overpowered and maybe it deserved a nerf, but I believe that the 70% nerf was a little bit overboard. So now its damage is only like 500 and its other functionalities are pretty much left unchanged. But even in this case, there's still situations where you can use the Hex grenade, especially if it comes in the variant that I have. And I think that this is the place where this grenade belongs right now. If there's a lot of enemies nearby, you can throw a few of these and they will subsequently spawn 6 other grenades that deal damage to a lot of them, chain between them, and it also homes on them. So yeah, the results are, as you can see, impressive. The The damage is still pretty big. It might not be as big as it used to be, but compared to other grenades that are on today's list, it still holds a spot on its own, and that is why I wanted to bring it as an honorable mention. Another one on the honorable mention list is the Hunter Seeker, and this is another wall drop, and the reason I'm even including this on the list is because of its very unique functionality. So this is very different from almost any grenade in the game, because when you throw it, it doesn't immediately go into the enemy, but rather it moves in very slowly and it shoots bullets into the enemy, also applying whatever effect it has on itself. In my case, I have cryo effect, so it freezes the enemies as it moves towards them, and I actually found this to be surprisingly good, even though it might not be that suited against huge groups of enemies, but single target damage on this thing can be definitely very high from the bullets themselves, but also from when it explodes. For some reason, when I tested this out, it applied a very strong debuff on the enemy that immediately destroyed its shields and its HP. Especially the dot that it applied was absolutely devastating. And the final honorable mention is going to be Tina's Hippity Hopper. This is another grenade that works pretty brilliantly, but the most important of them all is the fact that its base damage is pretty high, 4000, almost 500, pretty good radius, and mine comes with cryo effects. When you throw it on the ground, it bounces into the air and it starts spawning 2 sets of grenades 3 times, total of 6. So what this means is that if there's a concentration of enemies in front of you, or if they are in a tight spot, you can throw one of these and these will damage all of them at the same time. So it's definitely some very potent damage. The area of effect is also pretty damn big. The only downside that I can think of is if enemies move away from this area of effect, they won't get damaged almost at all, and you'll be left off with just wasting your grenades. Anyway, this has been today's list. Of course, there's a lot more that I didn't include. As you can see right here, there's so many of them in the game and so many of them in the legendary category. Anyway, let me know down below if there's any of them in there that you might wanted to see in today's list. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, a thumbs up on it would be super appreciated. Also subscribe and activate the notification bell, and I'll see you guys later.